things that you can put underneath your. No,
Oh yeah, let's do it up. All right. So, you feeling good? Feeling
Oh, yeah.
comfy?
So are we starting with him?
No. Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to Commissioner Wilson's virtual office hours.
Hello, happy Thursday.
Yay, happy Thursday. I missed you.
I missed you. It is very weird to do an office hours or really anything in this office without Lee. And of course, Ernest is behind the camera right now. We're always so grateful to his help. And I am honestly like, you are such a important component to everything that happens in and out of this office, that when you're away, even if it was really important, we missed you very much.
Well, I am happy to be back, and you know what? I came back, we jumped right in, and I am actually really excited because last BCC there was a lot of incredible conversations that I think everybody should be made aware of.
It was very, it's interesting because it wasn't a heavy agenda. You know, we've shown you the agendas that we have for our commission meetings. They're usually huge when there's big contractual items in them. And this one didn't have that, but there were really important components to it in county government. So we're going to hit the highlights of that, right? Maybe highlights.
Well, first off, let's say welcome, because you had a huge jump in followers within this past 2-week period. So a lot of new people.
Yay.
Welcome to the virtual office hours. This is a period for you to kind of be vocal and transparent and to break down what happens in local politics.
And just open up the door for any dialogue that that needs to happen. I believe that local government, actually all government, is a participatory sport, and that we rely on you to engage, and we don't always have to agree. We may not have all the answers, but that at least lets us know where you're coming from. So having you tuned in for the first time, just know that we do this every week to try to make sure that we're engaging in whatever way we can. It doesn't replace the community meetings. We're still doing those, but this is a way for us to have a dialogue. And sometimes we get a guest speaker like we're going to have in a few minutes here.
Yeah, so if you want to ask any questions, you can drop them in the comment box, or you can email district1@ocfl.net. We now have a total of 4 newsletters going out, so one every week. You can find that at NicoleWilson.org at the bottom of the homepage. Sign up for the newsletter for legislative updates and for event updates and just fun facts. So let's dive in.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Talk about, the BCC. For those who are new, what happens at the BCC, and when applicants are putting in new developments, how does that process work, and what's your role in getting that process
Okay,
through?
so we're going to back it up even a little bit further
Okay.
and say the BCC stands for Board of County Commissioners. So sometimes you'll see the acronym BCCOC, which is Board of County Commissioners, Orange County, and it's the governing body here in the county.
Yeah.
If you live in a municipality in Orange County, you have more than one government interaction on a local level, which is really great because oftentimes that's a layer of service. At the BCC, decisions are made for a variety of needs and issues that come up in our local government, and this one was really one of those that reached a broad spectrum of topics, from land use all the way to support for domestic violence victims and everything in between. So This was a very interesting week at the Board of County Commissioners.
Yeah. And one of the major discussions that came through was about some developments taking place over in the Horizon West area. And one in particular is called Spring Hill PSP. Maybe talk about what that means.
Well, it was, so this is every 2 weeks on top of what comes through a consent agenda, which is typically contractual obligations or renewals or procurement items. There are also land use cases. And so one of the things that the Board of County Commissioners is tasked with is evaluating applications for development in their districts. And this particular applicant was applying for a preliminary subdivision plan in an area that has seen an explosion in growth and a backlog of infrastructure. And we hear from residents every day that they're very concerned about the lack of infrastructure matching the amount of growth. They're very concerned about the clear cutting, or they call it mass grading or grubbing, of large parcels of land. And they're very concerned about their schools overcrowding, their road congestion, and all the things that go along with 600 new homes, or whatever the plan of that week is. And so when I started here, I promised the residents of District 1 that I would listen to their concerns and bring them to the attention of the Board of County Commissioners and work towards effecting a change. And one of the first things that we dug in on here, and that I tried to make sure that we were articulating very specifically the need for, was the protection of our forests and the protection of our mature growth canopy. We all know this helps us breathe. Those are our lungs. We get the oxygen from the trees. It helps, filter air of particulate matter. It helps bring down the temperature. It helps fight climate change. So we understand the value of old growth forests academically. But if you drive through areas of Orange County, it doesn't mean that there's good protections in place. So finding out where that gap was. Here we have the sustainability plan on the books that we voted for, and yet, I'm driving by huge land movers and piles of old growth forests burning. So we keep looking for answers inside for how that process can be scrutinized to protect what forests are left. And we kind of got the bureaucratic beatdown on how that process works. Essentially, we don't get a chance to review. And I say we as in the people that you elected. So you hired people, you hired me to scrutinize those cases. And your hired officials don't get the opportunity to look at the permits for mass grading. We get to look at it after it gets to a certain stage, and oftentimes that's happened already.
Yeah.
And so my objection, or my questions and concerns that I rose in conjunction with this case, and understanding that the case was asking for permission to build 60 homes on 40 acres, you can do the math there, with what looks like, potentially a dozen or so acres that are wetland that should be protected. So let's try to deduct that from that. There's nothing left. And so we do that in the hundreds of thousands of acres across Florida, and we will have nothing.
Yeah.
So, I described it during the meeting as building a hellscape, because when you drive through that area, if it's windy, you can't see in front of you. The topography of the landscape changes because they scrape it in order to be able to lay pipes even. Now, that's not the only way that you can develop residential or commercial entities. You can do it with the topography, which you see all over the country. It happens, but it's more expensive. It's a shortcut for developers to scrape it clean, because they can use less piping, they can use less concrete, they can use less asphalt. Their materials are easier to acquire in bulk because they're going to look the same for the entire subdivision. But it's why the subdivisions here look cookie cutter. It is very specifically a mass produced, it's a bulk sales item.
Yeah.
So my concern isn't singularly about trees or singularly about the wetland. It's both of those. But it's also about the ability to match that type of growth with the infrastructure. And ultimately, my question that day was, why does this come to us so far down the process that I can't do anything to express what residents have told me, which is it should not look like this. We shouldn't be having to play catch up with all of our infrastructure all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a difficult vote for me, because I made a motion to not approve. I basically said I don't think this is an appropriate time or place for this until I understand that we're looking at this mass grading, that we're looking at updating the tree ordinance. This will really do something pretty big and destructive while we're awaiting these procedural and policy updates. And the rest of the board didn't agree with me. So even though they do not represent District 1, a motion was made for approval and voted on, and your elected official was left out in the cold. So I am one vote. I have a very strong mandate from you, and I try really, really hard every chance I get to express what I've heard from residents. But I am just one vote. So I do need people to stay plugged in. And when there's an opportunity, when you have a chance, express those concerns across the board. And I mean the board, the whole county board of county commissioners. Because if another district is able to make a motion to approve a development case, and the board by majority can bypass me, then I'm not even sure why I'm there. And so it was very disheartening for me. And I think, reflecting on that, I have to really move on to the next thing, and understanding I'm still, even if I lose those at the dais that day, that I'm still expressing what my residents and my constituents have told me they want me to express.
Yeah. Now, I think a lot of people are questioning, why would anyone say no against the district commissioner who represents that area when they're not even representing necessarily that area? And one of the things that, I feel that they might be afraid of is litigation, like property rights. You have taught me so much about how a property owner has so many more rights than a tree.
Well, and the development process is framed weighing property rights with what we have in our comprehensive plan and our code, which means that there's always you can't just do anything with any piece of property, right? There's always going to be parameters, and there's permits that need to be applied for. So really what I was identifying was a permit process that wasn't done the right way, or maybe done in a reverse order. And I think that regardless of what the concern might be for litigation, at some point, if we were hired to do a job representing people, we have to go on record in saying this is what the residents have expressed as their concerns. This is what the residents have stated. By asking someone to not mass grade, you're not taking away their property rights, because they can still use that for the same reason, right? You can still develop on that site. I am not anti-growth.
Yeah.
I'm anti-bad growth. I'm anti-stripping the land of every piece of vegetation.
Yeah.
I'm anti-building a bazillion houses with no sidewalks. But those things don't constitute a violation of property rights. So those are just, you have to be able to not use that blanket excuse to give a rubber stamp to development.
Absolutely. And I think, the process especially when we're talking about Vision 2050, which I highly recommend everybody go and Google Vision 2050, Orange County, fill out the surveys, watch the videos and the workshops. You know, there's an urban area and then a more rural area that it feels as though our comprehensive plan that was supposed to protect that way of life, being in the more rural area, is being chipped away at years in the making before you even took office. And now you're getting what you called is like a fake vote, because you can't really vote because the damage is already done.
Well, the zoning for some of these areas
they
are in
flipped
place,
the zoning already outside of what the original comprehensive plan maybe had originally thought.
Right. The idea that the urban service line, which for District 1 basically is before the Butler Chain of Lakes. That was the original urban service line, which means that anything outside of that would be required to be at a certain density that because we didn't have services in that area.
No water, no firefighters really that much.
And I will say Horizon West was an exception when that was developed as a plan. The idea was because there were some very large employers, Disney, Universal, in that area, and there were farms, agriculture, citrus farms that were struggling. The idea was to have those as their independently developed area that had its own village space, right? A work here, play here, school here concept. It was a new urbanism plan. And I think had it been done without the ability for workarounds and exceptions to even those rules, then we may not be where we are right now. But the reality of it is they've chipped away at what those plans were. And so the people that were promised a certain lifestyle in that area are really struggling right now because their schools are overcrowded. There are sidewalks that end in for no good reason in places, and we just we're responsible to make sure that those things are fixed. So I don't take any of those decisions lightly. And
they have to commute like 45 minutes minimum just to get jobs to pay for the houses.
I think they said that the average was 27 minutes.
Yeah, that's a lot of time that you could be spending with your family, and you could be doing other things. But another interesting conversation that came up, which is kind of correlated to this, were the impact fees. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that vote.
So Orange County, actually all the counties, take a tax on any structure after it is developed as for it to pay off its impacts or to pay for its impacts. So the idea is very straightforward taxing, which doesn't happen very often. The idea that if you build a house or you build a commercial structure, that what is the impact of that going to be on our roadway, fire, school, and that there's a fee associated with that building. Orange County froze impact fees in 2012, and even though the cost of everything has gone up and the cost of houses that were being built went up and lots of profits were made, we were not getting any more revenue to shore up our aging infrastructure, to build any new infrastructure. So people always wonder, why do our public schools, why are they surrounded by portables, and why are there potholes on every road? And it's because we have decided to hit the pause button in long time ago on impact fees for developers. And what happened was, coming out of the 2008, 2009 housing crisis, the idea was we would discount these impact fees in order to entice some and encourage some of that economic driver and economic stimulus. It really should have been a temporary measure, and it just stayed in place. So we've been discounting the existing impact fees on top of them being completely held at that rate, which means that I think it's 38 cents on the dollar of what we should have been taking.
Oh my goodness.
Is what we were taking, and it really explains why we are so far behind in our infrastructure. So the commission recently increased to what it should have been, what the projections would be in order to really offset the impact of new development. And then the Florida legislature came in and preempted a little bit of federal state overreach there, a little government overreach into your backyard to tell you that the decisions that you make and the people that you trust here in local government aren't really going to be in charge of that anymore. And so we had to go back through, and staff members here had to jump through hoops and come up with a plan for basically a needs study, demonstrating a demonstrated needs study that we have to be able to increase those impact fees.
Yeah.
So, more legislative hoops, more red tape in order to do what we voted to do as a governing body. So we heard from some industry folks that it was going to be unfair, that it was going to affect affordable housing. But let's be really clear about something. We have incentives that are built into our development structure for affordable housing that are still in place and wouldn't be altered. So those incentives are there. That doesn't change. And really, if you're going to look at the threat of affordable housing as a reason not to increase impact fees, my question would be, where is the affordable housing from 2012 to 2021?
Mm-hmm. It should have been everywhere.
Yeah,
I mean, that's pretty much the deal.
Right. If the excuse was we can't raise impact fees because we're not going to be able to build affordable housing, then I'm going to ask, where in the world has all that good investment been?
Why are we worse off?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Another really fun conversation that I think a lot of people are eager to hear about, and we received a lot of emails, was about redistricting.
Oh, it's coming. So the way that you end up in a district for county government, and actually all representation in our representative government, is based on where you live. And in our Constitution, the idea of fair representation, it comes into play. Every 10 years, a census comes out, tells us how many people we have and where they live. Yep. And then we have to make sure that our districts here in Orange County are fairly distributed, that we as commissioners have an equal number of, not necessarily equal, but a fair distribution of the population. So this is really going to be important in District 1 because District 1 has grown as much as it's grown. So please stay engaged on this issue. These will be very public meetings, and we are mandated by the Constitution to not bisect communities, not bisect historical, cultural communities. And so one of the things that I did right out of the gate was for my appointee or nomination for the redistricting board, which is a board that will be discussing these potential lines of commission districts, is I appointed somebody that lives very close to one of the areas that's affected, because I really wanted to make sure that they had a seat at the table. I am going to make sure that every bit of information we get about that census and how it may look is coming straight out to you all. I have a lot of concern about the way the redistricting board's oversight is going to work. And so I think one of the things that will make me feel better about it is your engagement, right?
Yeah.
This is democracy at its most important. And when redistricting goes off the rails, bad things happen. And one of those things is that the people that we really want to be involved in government to get a voice are left out. So we need to really just make sure that we're communicating all the time. And if you have any questions about the way that redistricting is going to look, basically every one of the commission districts had 2 appointees, and then the mayor had 3. It's a little different for District 1 because the mayor lives in District 1, and the mayor appointed a District 1 person as a co-chair. And that's a part of having a very populated district. But it also makes me think I need to really make sure that the voices are being heard, that all the voices are being heard.
Yeah. Maybe you can just explain, how redistricting would impact individuals, because I think that there's still this kind of misunderstanding as to exactly how it would impact different residents specifically.
Well, it really would impact your options for your county commission specifically. So if you live in the city of Winter Garden in Orange County, this redistricting that we're discussing right now will not change your Winter Garden Commission representative. Your county representative is what's in play in this particular conversation that we're having, or this redistricting. And so if you look at the way Orange County is divided into 6 districts, and District 1 is all the way to the west, and then we basically counted out and then came back because we had to add a district from population. you can see that it's not always straight lines.
Yeah.
And so the concern is that when you have a group of people that form a community, they're not always an incorporated town. So we know that about the town of Ocoee and the town of City of Windermere and the City of Winter Garden, but Williamsburg, Hunters Creek, Horizon West, they don't have municipal charters. So the county government represents them, and so looking at and making sure that their representation doesn't bisect their community, because if a district line separates a community, then they don't have as loud of a voice. They don't have as much strength politically when it comes to decisions that are made on the board.
Yeah, and I guess, when I first saw how the maps looked, I always wondered, can't we just get a computer to, just figure out where people live and do that math and draw those lines for us? But I think the point of these appointments and the meetings and the public engagement is so that communities feel heard and represented and understand that they don't want to be bisected. They want to have...
And that's a constitutional mandate.
Yeah.
Because historically, there have been really devastating effects of gerrymandering in this idea of being able to literally write people out of government by drawing a line through their voice as a community. You're stronger as a community. You're stronger as one community voice. And so if you draw a line down the middle of that and say these people vote on this ballot and these people vote on this ballot, you've taken away all of their power. So those are really serious and important decisions. And I think that on a local level, it's often overlooked as being a really important process. So we're going to make sure we elevate that conversation. And we're going to live stream.
You're going to be tired of redistricting. You're going to be like,
we will, but it's going to be short. All of the meetings will be done and the recommendations will be in by January because there's a filing for the next round of elections and they have to be done by election.
Yep. Awesome. So we got a lot of emails about Orange County Public Schools restarting and out in your district.
Speaking of infrastructure issues.
You actually had 3 new schools open up and a lot of new students.
We have a lot of new students and we're really, everyone, and I mean all hands on deck across the board in county government and school board, trying to make sure that they have started safely. And on our side, what that means is there was a lot of interaction about what intersections look like and crosswalks, and we are really laser focused here on walkable, bikeable opportunities for transportation. And so there was some really top of the line, top of the priority list things that got done this week as far as getting blinking lights back in operating order, and the sheriff's department has been fabulous. Thank you for sending extra people out at crosswalks of concern, and Public Works was out making sure that they have straightened out signs that were, so there's been a lot of activity out there, but I wouldn't have known about many of those things without you all. So thank you for letting us know and giving us a heads up. We can get that ball rolling. 311 is sort of the official reporting mechanism that starts something on the Public Works side. But you can always let us know and still do call 311, do both. In that way, we can make sure that it's being followed up on.
Awesome. Well, I think it's about time we invite our special guest, someone familiar maybe, Dr. Chip Wilson. Hello, Dr. Wilson. Come and join us on the couch.
So yay! Yeah, okay, we need a soundtrack for that, don't we?
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that I frame why I asked Dr. Chip Wilson to come down here. For those of you who haven't met my husband, he is a family practitioner, and that is a job that takes care of individuals and families and their healthcare needs from the time that they're old enough to come into the doctor to the time that they often go into some kind of a geriatric facility, right? And so I'm really grateful to have his wisdom in a time that there is a ton of information floating around out there about healthcare and health needs, and of course the most pressing of those, which is the coronavirus, and it's not so novel anymore because we talk about it all the time. but I think hearing from someone who I know and trust, and I know that he is a scientist by training and trade and heart. So I just wanted to have him here today to talk about some of the things that rise up in our conversations with residents. Welcome.
Hi.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm kind of excited to be here.
Yay.
He usually watches.
I do.
Which listen, I love the idea of getting experts guests, because we are not, right? We like to do research and report research, but man, having somebody that actually sees patients here.
Well, thank you very much for having me in here, and I hope I can dispel some myths, or maybe answer some questions, or maybe frame some things in more of a layman's term. A lot of times we hear the scientists on the upper levels from NIH and CDC talking, and sometimes it just goes over your head. You don't really understand what they're talking about, and maybe I can bring that down to earth a little bit today, and kind of give some of my experiences so far.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I think a lot of people like to hear personal experiences. So what has COVID been like for you being a doctor?
Wow. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride for the past 18 months. You know, first it was whispers of this coming, and I was thinking like, oh, well, it'll probably be just like, you know, one of the other things that came through, like H1N1 or the swine flu that'll burn out quickly, and
Seems
we'll
like
go back.
so long ago that
It
we
does,
watched
yeah.
that dot, and then we watched dots popping up in Europe,
You know,
and then we watched
Yep.
the West.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know, we're a global community now. It was going to come one way or another, and just realizing that it wasn't slowing down where it started, and it was just getting worse and worse, and seeing that spread out, you know, and then you start thinking about people canceling travel plans, and now, you know, these countries are closed off to others, and you just really kind of had to start preparing at that point. And immediately we started with the education with people, and talking about, well, no, this is a real thing coming, and we are going to have to prepare, and you know, luckily I feel very fortunate to work in the Orlando Health group, and we had a lot of directive from upstairs that was giving us a lot of good ideas that maybe you wouldn't get in a solo practice, which I was in a solo practice at one time, nothing against that, but a lot of things were coming down as far as, you know, we need to start wearing masks, or, you know, we need to start, you know, really emphasizing hand washing, and, you know, these people need to be treated on an outpatient basis. It was really, from the get-go, big changes were made, and that was 18 months ago. You know, I thought it was crazy that we were going to have to wear masks every day. You know, when we were seeing patients, I'm so used to having that personal touch with patients, where I'm it's hands-on. You know, we're meeting people, we're examining them. You know, we're learning family histories, and
But you can still do all that with masks.
we can't do that with masks. It was just a change in the way we were doing it, and 18 months now, today I can't imagine going in right now without a mask on.
Well, I was going to say, can you tell us a little bit about why masks make a difference?
You know, masks are one of the biggest things that can prevent the spread of the virus, because it's predominantly a respiratory virus. Every time you breathe out, if you are infected, you're breathing out virus particles. And I was reading a study where every breath you exhale has about 5 virons in it, or the virus particles. If you sneeze, 20,000 or more, or excuse me, a cough, 20,000 or more virus particles come out. If you sneeze, it's hundreds of thousands of virus particles. If you have a mask on, you're able to capture those virus particles, if not all of them, you know, a good majority of them. Masks really are to protect people from you if you were to have the virus and you didn't realize it. You do get some protection wearing a mask from other people. It's really best if both parties were wearing a mask. That way you're not spreading the virus particles, you're not bringing them in.
And that was the guidance when we started really understanding some of that, the aerosol spread, right? That was the guidance that we got, and it seemed to really make a difference. And all of, you know, our numbers kind of started coming down when that guidance came through, and mask mandates were working. We saw those positivity numbers coming down, and then the vaccine came out, and we were so like, yay, vaccine.
Absolutely.
And I'm still like, yay, vaccine. And we've all been vaccinated right here, my whole office. I know, we're like, So explain a little bit, because I think this is where people get confused, and understandably, that if I've been vaccinated and I go into a store now, why would I need to wear a mask?
Well, that's a great question, and that answer has actually changed here recently with the emergence of the Delta variant. When the vaccine initially came out, your antibody loads after the second vaccine were getting up high enough with the newer vaccines that you could comfortably say that you weren't going to get the virus, or you weren't going to spread it. The Delta variant, we're seeing much more breakthrough. So you could actually get the virus even though you've been vaccinated. The likelihood of you getting very sick is very small, but you could still walk around asymptomatic, meaning you have no symptoms, and be spreading the virus to other people. And if you spread it to an unvaccinated person, they could have a very, very bad outcome.
And I think, it's one of those things where I had to process that, like, okay, wait a minute. So I, as a vaccinated person, could have some either asymptomatic or mild symptom case because the Delta variant has changed a little bit of that,
Right.
and then potentially go out and get a child sick who can't get vaccinated at all.
Well, and that's the problem with the unvaccinated also, because the symptoms of the COVID virus are so wide and so different. The presentation is so different in so many different people. It can be everything from the fever, loss of smell, loss of taste, change in GI symptoms, to no symptoms at all. I mean, people come in and they're like, well, I went to get a test because my roommate or my person that I was exposed to had one, and I'm positive, but I feel completely fine. But that's someone that can be walking around in the community that wasn't responsible to get the test and still infect a lot of other people
who are not
it.
Unvaccinated.
And vaccinated people as well, because with the Delta variant, we're getting some crossover. That's.
So is it worth it to get a vaccine?
Oh, absolutely. I think hands down, the vaccine is the best thing you can possibly do to protect yourself, especially with the Delta variant.
But I think the thing that I wish I could scream at the rooftops or wear a T-shirt of is that it doesn't mean you can't get sick. It's that it lessens your opportunity of going to the hospital or death, your
Absolutely.
risk of hospitalization or death.
That's a great point, Lee, because I'm fortunate to have some of the data from the hospitals around, just being in the group. And Central Florida has somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 hospitalized patients with COVID. I don't have exact ICU numbers and things, but between the two hospitals, it's my understanding about 90 to 95% of those people that are hospitalized are unvaccinated. And the number of people that are on vents or having to use respiratory assistance is very small. I mean, I don't know if there's even a handful of people on vents that weren't vaccinated.
Yeah.
Or that were vaccinated.
That were vaccinated. Yeah, I kind of figured. So what about if someone has asthma? And this is something I've heard. There was a friend of a friend who didn't want to get vaccinated because they said, well, I don't want to get vaccinated because I have asthma.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you what, I've been I've been living with asthma since I was 12 years old, and I was first in line to get the vaccine because asthma would be one of the things that would potentially make the COVID symptoms worse for you. You're going to be more likely to end up in the hospital.
So some of the people who are avoiding the vaccine
absolutely
are really the ones that needed to be first in line.
Anything that would suppress your immune system or make it harder for you to fight the vaccine would be a better reason for you to get the vaccine. You want to get the antibodies up. If you have heart problems, CHF or...
What if you're a cancer survivor?
Yes, you should, but you should talk to your oncologist first, because there are some cancer patients that are on immunosuppressive therapy that you want to make sure that...
Always check with your own physician.
Right. But if you're a cancer survivor, barring the fact, if you were on any type of therapy at that point that would contraindicate you getting the vaccine, yes, you should absolutely get the vaccine.
And can I ask another, one of these questions and I shouldn't even give any oxygen to some of the wacky stuff that's floating around out there, but I think sometimes calling it out and putting it to rest is an idea. that we have to do because there's so many of them. But this, there's a really big fear that people are going to get a neurological effect from the vaccine. Guillain-Barré, there's some other effects that they feel like
Right.
that this particular vaccine is somehow a risk for.
Well, there's several of these theories out and about, and there's different reasons why they're out there. But Guillain-Barré is a side effect that can happen with any vaccine that you get, but it's very, very uncommon. I don't know the exact percentage, but the chances of you getting Guillain-Barré from this vaccine is very low. There was a vaccine that they made for the swine flu, previous to H1N1, that there was several incidents of Guillain-Barré, and they actually pulled that vaccine. They stopped it because of the incidence of Guillain-Barré.
So it's something they look for.
Yeah, they absolutely look for it. There's what's called the vaccine, VARS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that has any side effect after getting a vaccine can report into the system. It's a good system if you're looking at the whole picture, and
Because you can look for patterns.
you have to extrapolate the data. You can't look at one thing and one event that's been reported on the VARS because anybody can report on that. You can't look at that one data point and say that this is there's a correlation here, and it's a causative effect. You have to look at.
And I just want to kind of dive into that for a second, because this is one of these ideas that takes a little bit to think about. So there's anecdotal stories out there that people say, but this happened to my cousin, or this happened to my friend, or whatever. And I think those are legitimate. There are potentially something going on. But what that correlation identification means is that if I'm going through my life, I could have an allergic reaction to what I ate for breakfast this morning. And if I had my shot yesterday, I potentially could go on to that and report that I had an allergic reaction.
Yeah.
And it can be interpreted by somebody
Right.
out there as being an allergic reaction to a vaccine, but nobody knows, because correlation doesn't mean causation.
And that is correct. That is correct. And the incidence of allergic reactions with this vaccine, from my reading, has been very low. If you have an allergy to flu shots, it doesn't matter with this vaccine. There's no egg product with this.
Really? Okay,
Yeah, no,
so
not at
flu
all.
shot allergies.
No, not at all. Matter of fact, I was just reading a little bit ago. The only or the two major components is polyethylene glycol and polysorbitol. I don't know if in 20 years of practice, if I had a patient come in and tell me that they're allergic to polysorbitol. I mean, maybe someone that has an allergic reaction to one of the preservatives in a vaccine, they would be more cognizant of that. But no, I think the incidence of allergic reactions, true allergic reactions to this vaccine, are very small. And well, yes.
No, I was going to ask about blood clots, because I know a lot of women at the
Right.
beginning, I think there was like 3 cases of women
There-
that had blood clots.
Well, maybe a little higher than that. I think it was the last I saw was 7 or 10, and that was a while ago.
Several
and they've come,
several million people ago.
right,
Yeah.
right. Well, but with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, they have they've now recommending that women under 50 years of age not to get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, because it may slightly increase your chance of having a clotting disorder. That being said, it is still a very, very small percentage of people that were getting that, and they only made that recommendation out of an abundance of caution, because there's other options.
Right.
If we were on a desert island, well, it wouldn't be a good place.
Well, no,
to
what
be,
you're
it wouldn't be
saying
a great
is
place
that
to
if
be.
Johnson & Johnson was the only one we'd have, we would
still be
be
using it because that was our best option.
Right.
And
So the reality is, here in Orange County, if you're getting a vaccine, Orange County is administering Pfizer and Moderna only right now, for no other reason than that we had the capability for the refrigeration, even in our mobile unit. But overall, all of these have been very safe and effective.
Right.
And what did you say earlier? The number of people that have been vaccinated now is...
Oh, in Florida, I was reading 13.1 million people were vaccinated last time I checked. Back to the Johnson & Johnson, it is a great product that they can get out to the communities. If someone, it's a 1-dose shot. If you're going into a underserved community, that doesn't have a chance to come back, or you can't track them coming back nearly as well, or maybe they don't have a primary care doctor, and you're able to go to a library or community center or mall or something, that's an excellent opportunity to get out into the public and get more people covered with vaccine.
Yeah. Now, when people say that they can get a doctor's note or they can't get a doctor's note because they're high risk of something, you can give a doctor's note if you have any type of medical disability, period, right? No one can say, oh, I can't get a doctor's note even though I know I'm sensitive to blank, right? How do you go about that, and how do you determine who needs a doctor's note and who doesn't?
A doctor's note to get them exempt from?
To get them exempt from taking the vaccine.
Well, I haven't written a note that exempts anybody from the vaccine
Yeah,
yet. I've had a few people come to me, and true story, one of our major employers here in Central Florida mandated that all employees be vaccinated, all non-union employees be vaccinated by a certain date. And I had an employee come in to me and say, listen, I need a note for this. And I said, patient, you have no medical reason not to get this, and this may be the thing that saves your life, or this may be the thing that prevents you from passing it on to cast members, other cast members, or patrons of your park. This is a very safe thing. And I talked to him a little bit about the vaccine, and at the end of the conversation, he's like, okay, I'm ready to get it, let's go. And well, I don't have it here, you have to go to the spot. We explain that, but a lot of it is just
getting those questions answered.
Getting the questions answered and getting over the bridge the mistrust there. And
So if you're one of those people, and I think that's fair, it's really legitimate, but reach out to your provider, or reach here and we'll try to get in touch with somebody. But I think it's important because your specific question may be something different than somebody else's, and finding out if you've had a history of some kind, and finding out that it's safe for your whatever that diagnosis is going to feel like a relief.
I should say that true allergies, like we said before, to the two components. If you have an immune deficiency, a true immune deficiency, if you have HIV and you're on certain treatments, if you had a transplant and you're on medications that suppress your immune system, or high-dose corticosteroids that would, dampen the immune response. There are some it's a very small percentage of people, and quite frankly, in my practice, I would likely refer to the oncologist or the infectious disease doctor that's treating that condition.
But it's usually somebody that's seeing a specialist, because those are such high-risk individuals.
So I just want to make sure that information is out there. I'm not saying that absolutely everybody can get the vaccine, but the percentage of people that can't get the vaccine is much smaller than I think what the general population believes.
Okay, awesome. Now, you brought up mistrust. What are the feelings that you've been exposed to? Like, what are people saying, and where's their mistrust rooted in from your experiences?
Well, I think it's very easy to put out misinformation or non-fact based information in today's social media. Internet access is very easy. Anybody that wants to say anything they want to can get online, make a website, and put out any information they want to. So, I'm constantly trying to talk people out of TikTok information, out of social media sites, out of not even just Fox News, but major news sources that don't necessarily.
Or that you extrapolate some sentence and then it gets applied in a different setting.
I believe there's a mask mandate in the state level with the schools, and the lawyers for our governor actually extrapolated from a 700-page brief this one sentence, but then you read down further and it says masks absolutely work well. But you can pick out information you want to, so you got to really make sure that you're going to a source that you trust and that gives you good information.
Yeah.
So.
Well, maybe you can talk a little bit about the Tuskegee experiments and how people have history there that they're worried about repeating.
Right, and that is one of the complaints or fears that some of my African American patients have come in with. They don't trust this. They don't. It's too new. I don't want to do it. I don't want to be the guinea pig for this.
Right.
And I mean, if I were an African American person, I would certainly have to think about that, knowing what happened with the Tuskegee experiments. And if you don't know, that's a long time ago. A group of doctors let some men in Tuskegee, Alabama, I believe it is, who tested positive for syphilis, let them go untreated. And for years they followed them. For years they followed these people and let them, when a simple antibiotic could have cured the problem, they let them go and see what happened. And, you know,
they were under the impression they were being treated.
Yes.
And so there was a deception,
You know,
and so the history was that they were led astray under the guise of experimentation.
You know, I cannot begin to tell you how awful that is. And if I were of the ethnicity or any minority for that matter, I would have to think about that and think like, well, you know, do I want to be the next? Do I want to be the next Tuskegee patient? Do I want to be the guinea pig? Well, and I understand that, but I think we're to the point now that there's been over 300 million doses of the three vaccines that are available given out, and that is so much more information that we have now than you would have even going through the regular FDA approval over time. We have hundreds of times more information than we do at that point.
Yeah.
So I feel very safe in recommending my patients that come in with those types of questions that, you know, I understand your desire to wait and see what happens.
We're
beyond that point. We're at a red zone that we need to stamp this out as quickly as possible, because what a lot of people don't understand also is this virus is, you know, we're at DEFCON 3 or 4 with the Delta variant. When the virus first came out, you know, it was the virility, how, you know, much it spread was down here. Got a little worse with another variant that came through. Didn't quite hit us as much. Delta variant's up here, but there is another level that we can reach that will really overwhelm us. And
so let me ask you a question then. Is the idea of herd immunity evolving as the variant changes? Because it sounds like that.
Well, yeah, you know, I was thinking about that the other night actually, because if you got COVID initially, you were exposed, you had the virus, you produced your own antibodies, you could kind of make the argument that, well, I've been exposed now, I've had COVID, I'm not going to get it again. The Delta variant doesn't care. It's coming through and hitting those people. They're getting hit twice. And, you know, when you get COVID, your antibody levels, you know, will come up to about here from, you know, baseline. If you get the vaccine, your antibody levels go much higher. Mm-hmm. And now that we have this booster that's coming out, it's already available if you're over 65 or if you're, you know, certain immune compromised patients are advised to get it. Your level of antibodies is going up 6 and 20 times higher than what you started with. That's a tremendous amount, and depending on what study you look at. But
so you're saying the people who have had the booster now, who are either immunocompromised or fall into a category that is approved, you're seeing
their antibody levels are going much higher than you would anticipate with just another shot.
I'm ready for my third.
I am too. I'm waiting my turn.
Right, I meant that. But the idea that we're sort of doing the lift right now for people who aren't willing to do it, and I know that every time throughout history that there has been opportunity for vaccination, I feel like we kind of nostalgically think about, you know, times before this where people were willing to get their polio vaccine or their smallpox vaccine, but I can guarantee you that there were struggles with treatment in convincing people. And I know that this feels like a historic time. It is, but science has gotten us past some very devastating illnesses. And you think about what our parents and their parents endured for us to be here. I feel like the least we could do is to do our homework, do the research, listen to our doctor, and really protect the young people right now. It's really scary to me that there's a population that no matter how much convincing we do, with the data that can't get the vaccine because they haven't been approved for it yet, and we're not sure yet if it's the right treatment for them. And those young people are being exposed every day to unvaccinated people who don't really think that they're doing damage.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to touch on also, I think a lot of people don't understand what the difference is with the mRNA vaccine versus a traditional vaccine. The most traditional vaccines take a virus and they denature it, or they heat kill it, or do something to make it less virulent, and they get a protein from that, whether, in this case it's the spike protein, or an envelope, or some part of the virus particle, and they will take that particle and then inject it in people and have the body's immune system respond to that protein that's been introduced to the body that's not supposed to be there.
So I'm going to say this in ways that people like me that went to law school, not medical school, can understand. They take a piece of the virus.
Or
they
people like me that are just environmental scientists.
Right. The old way was you take a piece of the virus and you put it in, and then that builds the antibody.
Right.
But
the way the mRNA vaccines work, 15 years ago, we didn't have the ability, we didn't have the technology to sequence an organism. When this virus came out, very quickly the genetic code was put on the internet, and it was given to the world.
That's the virus's genetic code, not yours.
Very
different.
The viral genetic code was put basically on the internet for all scientists in all countries to try to figure out, something that we can do. Some piece of this genetic code that produces a protein that we can copy, we can mimic, and we can produce a vaccine for. Okay, very quickly they were able to. I say very quickly, but compared to the way we've done vaccines in the past, very quickly they were able to isolate a portion of this viral genetic material, and they were able to come up with the code that would go with that viral DNA that would be taken to the part of your cell that would make the protein. So in the virus, its genetic code would split apart. The mRNA would make a copy along this part of the DNA, and then that long strand of mRNA would go over to a ribosome in the virus, and it would produce proteins. Okay. Actually, the viruses use our ribosomes, but that's beside the point. Just for the safety of their. What they've done is they've taken that mRNA code and they've gone to basically machines. They've punched in this code, and then they've inserted it into a mechanism to get it into our own bodies, and then we use our own ribosomes to make these spike proteins. Not the rest of the virus, just the spike proteins. It's not touching our DNA. It's using our ribosomes to make proteins. We make proteins all the time.
Yeah.
We make proteins that are useless. We make proteins that are very useful. We make proteins for all different kinds of things. Our body's ribosomes are just making these extra proteins that...
Without you having to get the
and another part
antibody.
of our body sees that as foreign, and you amount the same immune response that you would had you just stolen the proteins from the virus and put it in somebody.
It's really amazing.
You're kind of tricking your natural
You really
body
are tricking
process.
you're absolutely tricking your natural
before
body.
the virus has a chance to do the harm.
Never does the mRNA that's being injected you interact with your own DNA, and it's not permanent. They have to keep this virus, the vaccine at like minus 100 degrees, like minus 98 degrees, just to keep it stable enough to get it here and transport it and put it in people. It will only stay in your body for 7 to 14 days.
Wow.
Okay.
So
at that point, it's
body
denatured,
takes
it's
over.
broken down. Yeah, it's gone.
It's amazing.
But the immune response is still ramped up and going
And that's so without COVID, without the vaccine, our immune response is always fluctuating based on what we're exposed to, based on different germs that we are outside being exposed to or indoors. And so it sounds like people much smarter than myself really are analyzing this and looking at the harm that could be done,
Absolutely.
and trying to anticipate through years and years and years of studying different strands of the virus on how this could
and they can make
combated.
these changes so quickly. I don't know, I think maybe it was a 60-minute program or something, but the Moderna group is actually working on the flu vaccine, because what we used to do traditionally
HIV,
was
there's an HIV?
yeah, they were looking at what flu happened, in Asia, because it typically goes around our country or our world, in a certain pattern. We would look at what was in one part of the world and base our next flu vaccine on what was there, just trying to get ahead of the game. And then that's why some years it'll hit, some years it won't. But it's a very long process. You have to grow it. You have to find out which is coming. It takes 3 months to grow the virus and then to extrapolate it. It's a very long process. With the mRNA technology and with the ability to sequence things, they're going to be able to make changes, mid-flu season, even from what it was sounding like. I mean, literally they can make it that quickly and
Yeah,
it's amazing.
And you brought up technological advancements. I think about the TV and phone that my grandma and my great-grandma used compared to what we have access to now in the medical field. I can only imagine the advancements.
I use a lot of analogies, and I've time and time again I've told people, like, it took Henry Ford 12 years to make the first Model T, from his conception to the come off the first one he made. It took Elon Musk 5 years.
Right.
It took him, less than half the time, but this is a much better car, having your Tesla versus the Model T. It's because we have advances. They've learned
The process itself.
off all the technology and all the advances they've had in the past. It's
a great analogy.
Yeah, not to mention to mass produce the Tesla and to distribute it all over the world. That process in comparison
I'm
to
still
what
waiting for mine.
Ford, and so I think that might also be a mistrust, especially in between generations.
Right.
Absolutely.
Of the fact that people of maybe my grandma's age and even my parents' age probably didn't see this type of distribution of a vaccine, especially they probably didn't live through a global pandemic at this level.
Right.
And now this advancement and the small amount of time of the vaccine coming out, how much money has been put into this vaccine, there's mistrust there because it just feels very, very fast in comparison to what other generations have seen.
It is fast because it had to be fast.
Yeah.
We saw the tidal wave coming, and whether you believed it or not, it was coming. That's when they started working on a vaccine. Yes, a company is making a vaccine. A company has to be profitable,
And what is the difference between the experimental versus, because this is where the other part, people are like, I'm not putting something experimental in me. I'm like, I don't think it's experimental when...
I think they're very worried about the mRNA being a new technology, but again, we are past the point of it being an experiment.
I was going to say, even when it was really approved, it wasn't approved experimentally, it was approved provisionally, right? Because the production time was increased.
To get the FDA approval, there's a very regimented process. There has to be so much time from point A to point B for each step, and step A, B, C that they go through. A lot of red tape, and you can't rush that process. They were able to give the provisional okay to use it because we're in a pandemic situation. We're in a literal fight or flight mode, and we need to fight.
Yeah.
Not
Well, that was, and this is where I learned this about the production typically of any medicine does not start until you are done with the trials, and so that adds years. And so instead, they really took a gamble and began trials and production at the same time because the early trials were promising. So that was the other part of it.
They had a gamble on by the drug makers.
Yes, because the drug makers, I mean, had they gotten to the end of that and it was ineffective, then it would have been a loss on production. But they also saved how many lives by being able to release it when they released it once the trials were done and once we had been able to see that it was safe and effective. So really, when you look at the process, it's all the same process as we get in any approval. It's just some of the things happened concurrently instead of sequentially.
Yeah.
Correct.
And we
Yeah.
still, like you said, there's been more vaccinated people under, for this particular pandemic than there have been probably for any treatment in modern history. As far as worldwide application of vaccine. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been, I feel like we could have gotten there. We were so close. And eradication, if you think about what smallpox eradication meant, it meant that we had to get down, that we had to get it so far down that they couldn't transmit.
People went door to door. And,
Yeah.
administered it. But I wanted to know, you brought up you can't just Google or YouTube, your way through this information. What are some good sources that you recommend people can trust, and what steps if someone wants to get informed that might be on the edge of mistrust?
Johns Hopkins is my favorite.
I think the first thing to go to would be the CDC.gov website or NIH.gov website. There's some good patient information there. If you're going to do a web search, you got to look at where their information is coming from. You got to look at the end of the article where it's coming from.
Yep.
Is it just someone's opinion, or are they taking real information from your JAMAs and the
peer
exactly.
reviewed research articles.
So you just got to really look at where the source of the information is.
I will tell you,
from.
Johns Hopkins has a public health page.
Amazing site.
Yeah, it's an amazing site, and you can sign up for newsletters that provide updates on everything, not just COVID, but really some really great health information in general. But their COVID resources have been from the beginning really, really on top of it. And the Mayo Clinic has some really good updates that come out. Those are both very trusted sources. YouTube, don't do it. Just don't do it.
Well, I wanted to ask you, when you get the people that are saying, like, do I have a microchip, or am I magnetic now? Do you have a way to facilitate that conversation into the facts, into the trust and getting vaccinated?
Yeah, I'm never going to look at somebody and say you're a total nut job or something like that, because you don't get anywhere by being controversial. But I usually, depending on what their argument is, if they think they're putting something in to track me, I think we start talking about, well, if they really wanted to track you, don't you think they would just use your cell phone and get the cell phone data? It would be so much cheaper and easier to break into the Verizon network and get these data points than to inject something in you, at a tremendous cost. And
I think the other one that gets me is that
the magnet one. I tell people that I haven't seen anybody put a compass up to that yet. And that's my challenge right now, is for someone to get the vaccine and show me with a compass that you're changing the polarity of the magnet would. So
and the other, the idea of trying to kill off the population, I'm like, actually we could have just sat back and not had a vaccine. And
right. And
it seems to be a very effective way to kill off the population. So it's really sad. It's a very sad thing for me that the mistrust has put people in harm's way.
Right.
And to hear from Dr. Pino downstairs about the people who are getting ready to be intubated saying, I wish I'd gotten my vaccine. Can I get my vaccine? It's heartbreaking.
Another one I hear a lot of times is like, well, I don't want to get it because the inflammation around the heart that can occur. And there have been, reported, some very few cases of cardiomyopathy or inflammation around the heart. The chance of getting that is 0.04%. And you are, depending on what study you read, 600 to 2,000 times more likely to get the same problem from COVID, getting the virus, than you are from getting the vaccine. Yeah. So, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense not to get the vaccine in that case. So, I think you really have to look at it point by point by, what argument they're coming in with on, why they don't trust, getting the vaccine. And, and there's some people that, no matter what you do, they're not going to get it. And I have gotten down to the point where I tell people that, listen, you're going to get the antibodies one way or another. Either you're going to get through the vaccine in a safe manner, or you're going to roll your dice with the COVID. I don't think we're shutting down again. When we shut down, we didn't have an option. That was the only thing that we could do, the safest thing that we could do. to prevent the spread. Wear masks, social distance, and everybody stay home for a while. Okay, and in theory, had everybody done that and waited out your 2 weeks and not had any contact at all, it would have run out. It's so hard to do, and I don't blame anybody for going to the grocery store or anything like that. It just, you couldn't do it. All right. Now we have an option. You can get the vaccine. You can make an educated decision if you're 12 years or older to get a vaccine. So, I don't think we're shutting down again. I think you're going to either get your vaccine and get your antibodies, or you're going to get the COVID, which is now spreading as fast as measles, or chickenpox rather. It's very much more contagious than it was the first go around. So.
Mm-hmm. And now with the FDA approval, does that mean more mandates, more,
I think you're going to see more companies coming out and coming online with the whole either you get vaccinated or you don't work here.
Military, right?
Absolutely, the military jumped in at that point, which makes sense. And I'm seeing a lot of people that were resistant early on are now getting the vaccine. I'm seeing more people coming in with. We have a shot registry in Florida that, when you get your shot at most sites, it'll go in, and it's not to track people, it's just so they have an idea of who's had the vaccine. I was going to say, and I
just want to be clear for anybody that's kind of paying attention to this, we've always done this. You've got your shot records when you put your kids in school.
It originally started off.
When you go to your HR.
It originally started off, kids would go from, pediatrician to pediatrician, or they move, and we'd have to start the series all over again. And, it wasn't even that long ago. I think it's within the last 20 years they came out and said, like, well, if we put all the shots that these kids are getting into this shot registry, if you go to another doctor, you'll be able to pull this up, and as long as they, were participating. And it's been a great thing for kids. I pull them up for, going to for college. I hand them their record, and I looked at this. I filled out your paperwork. Keep it for future. It is a great resource. And they've just piggybacked onto that and just put the vaccines that we're getting now into that registry, so we have an idea of what you've had and when. So
yeah, I try to educate people on the fact that we're part of an ecosystem,
right,
which means that nature has ways of killing us, right? and viruses and diseases and droughts and all of these factors are things that could harm us, like predators and etc. And I always think of the virus as one of those things, and I think people get caught up in like human intention, like is someone trying to control me or some kind of conspiracy? And I'm like, no, Mother Nature is trying to find a way to create that balance within an ecosystem. And luckily we have innovation, we have scientists, we have
so
data.
Lucky to live when we
and I think it's just, if we could look at it that way, that if it wasn't COVID-19, it would be something else. It would be something else 10, 20 years from now. There's always going to be threats. There's always constantly threats that we can and cannot see, that we have to just know and be prepared for.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
then make the educated choices on how to combat what's coming, whether, Mother Nature's forest fire and we send firefighters.
That's right.
Exactly.
I'm curious. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
In this case, we do whatever we can to come up with a vaccine or a way to prevent it. And maybe it had been a medicine. Maybe they came out and a company had this great product that would stop it. That would be being used. But it's not the case. We got a vaccine.
Yeah. Do we have any questions?
I have some questions.
Okay.
Awesome.
Oh boy.
So there have been people that have died after getting the vaccine, especially people that are like 80 years old or something like that. What do you tell somebody who's like in their 20s that won't get the vaccine because somebody died after they got the vaccine?
Yeah, people, unfortunately, people do die, and the incidence of someone dying after getting the vaccine is very, very, very small. I don't even know of many cases.
Yeah,
to be
correlation
honest with
and
you.
causation,
Yeah, absolutely.
it might not necessarily be.
And the chance of that drops precipitously as you get younger.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think early on there was probably more cases that appeared that way because the very first group of people that were eligible for the vaccine were the sickest, oldest people.
Yeah.
So, what would that have looked like without the vaccine? I don't know. We don't have that kind of hindsight, but once again, it's one of those anecdotal case studies where you look at somebody
Right.
who was at a higher risk of mortality in the first place to be your excuse. If you're a younger, healthier person, that's not not going to be your model.
A lot of people that I know don't have health insurance, which means that they don't have a relationship with a primary care physician. How do you, when you say like talk to somebody that you trust, how do you reach those people that have never, maybe they went to a doctor when they were a kid, but now as an adult, they do not ever.
That's a great
go to
question.
a doctor, and they don't have that kind of rapport established.
Wow, you know,
That's a great
I
question.
haven't really thought about that because people are coming to me. I'm not really in the community outreach.
I can answer at least the question about the vaccine costing something.
No,
if someone's
no,
trying
no.
to sell you the vaccine, it's a
Don't buy
scam.
it.
We are, the health department, along with Orange County, it is absolutely free and accessible to everybody. It doesn't matter your age or your insurance. So that is something that I wanted to say. I know that there are, the healthcare providers are doing their own thing, but as far as from the health department and the county, you don't need to have any proof of insurance at all.
I mean, I know I didn't grow up with health insurance. I didn't go to the doctor regularly. I'm just now starting to get my adult card and doing that.
We all
But
peer pressure each other.
But I would definitely say, I just pay attention to who's saying what. I see a lot of people who are anti-vaxxers that are riddled with fear, and I see them also saying things that are very fear-based and misinformed, that aren't following the data. And then I see respected individuals that are kind of my peers that I look up to, that I know do research, that I know are educated individuals that seek the truth, whether they know their own biases or they are surrounded by other people that might go against what they believe. And I trust those people because I see how much work that they do, and I see that they seek for the truth and they're not just followers. And unfortunately, we're in a time where misinformation is running rampant.
Yeah.
I just say, if someone's saying that they don't believe in the vaccine, look at the people that they're surrounding themselves with and what they believe and are they fear-based.
And listen, I mean, I'm somebody, you know me, I am extremely cautious. I am very, I'm an anxious person. It's part of like my motivation for a lot of things I work really hard on. But I will say that if I start doing the research, I look at the numbers and you look at the data, and it doesn't lie. And so science isn't a liberal, it's not a conservative, science isn't a Republican or a Democrat, science isn't good or bad, it is just science. And there's a methodology, and then there's data that comes out, and it's ongoing, which is also really important, right? Because it has changed.
To circle back to your question, Ernest, though, I think an individual that didn't have access to a primary care, like one of my patients coming in, I would seek out a trusted source for information, not a entertainment venue like TikTok or something along those lines, but go to the NIH site or go to
NIH is National Institutes of Health.
right, or go to the CDC site and read the patient information section on that, or the Mayo, and you had mentioned
And the
the
reason
Johns
why
Hopkins
Johns
site.
Hopkins, because those are we hear people say peer-reviewed research. It means that scientists are literally trying to poke holes in other
like,
scientists.
If I wrote a paper and I made it peer-reviewed, all my colleagues would look at this paper and they say, like, "Oh my gosh, you're an idiot! I can't believe you did this on here." And
It's literally grading each
it
other.
has to pass that muster test. It has to have, my colleagues would have to look at it and say, like, "Oh, yeah, that seems logical, and you did it in a sound way," and that's peer-reviewed.
Now
then
multiply that by the whole world.
Right, exactly.
Reviewing
And then they
this data.
replicate it, and that's how you get really some of the most, I think, consequential outcomes is by replicating.
As opposed to a YouTuber that just
Yeah.
turns the camera on and can just spout out their information and that they believe is truth, and then they don't get scrutinized at all.
There's some therapies that have been proposed. We've all heard about the hydroxychloroquine and now ivermectin, and they didn't stand the peer review. some things came out. Somebody said, "Oh, this has a great mechanism of action. It should work," and they started prescribing to a lot of people. And oh, everybody in this country is prescribing. The studies that have been done since then are not showing, it's not producing the same evidence, and just either the studies are underpowered, meaning there's not enough patients in them to really make a good inference, or it doesn't have the same results. It's all over the place.
Because the number of participants in any research makes it more valid, right? So when you look at a vaccine like this, where it has been disseminated so widely, those are really substantial numbers of efficacy.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you have a treatment that's done on a smaller group, there can be anecdotal evidence, which means that it's like a case that there's also the power of persuasion. If you are not feeling good and you take something and you feel better, you're going to tell people about it, and it's I don't say it's a valid therapy, but it's something that happens, and that's great if that's something that happens. But you have to also look at the side effects of some of these therapies. The ivermectin potentially could cause hepatic failure. It's a small percentage of people, but at the doses that they had recommended, which is all over the place. So tell me what that one is again. The
ivermectin is
ivermectin.
It's an anti-parasite medication we use to treat worms. And then the hydroxychloroquine is a medicine that they use predominantly in rheumatology. That's a doctor who does arthritis. There's certain conditions like lupus benefit from it, but there's also side effects with that medication. It can prolong your QR interval and potentially cause an arrhythmia. And again, they didn't see the studies showed conflicting evidence on whether it would help or not help or harm you even. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, in closing, please get the vaccine.
Yeah, and listen, I am so grateful for you to come in and talk to us about this. This is going to be an ongoing issue until we are able to safely send kids back to school and to walk amongst each other without the fear.
And maybe if we get some more questions in the comments, I'd be more than happy to come back maybe in a week or two and do this again. And
we'd love that. And
answer some of
hopefully,
these things.
I was going to say, hopefully we round a corner, because, my heart goes out to all of our medical providers who have been trying really hard to do, not just the treatment, but the education. And there's an emotional toll that's being paid across the world right now in our healthcare providers, and they're frustrated because right now they feel like this is preventable. The death and dying that they're seeing is preventable. So, I just thank you. I thank everybody, that is in your hospital.
Not even me. I mean, our heart needs to go out to the people working in the ERs and the ICUs and the floors. These nurses and these doctors, these hospitalists.
Thank you.
And the emergency technicians out there, firefighters, people that really are the front line. I'm called front line, but I'm really the back of the front line. I'm watching these guys work really hard, and I could not imagine day in and day out going through what they're going through right now.
So help us get done with this.
Seeing patient after patient that could not have been there in the first place.
Yeah, and it's sad because we're in this bubble of hearing the information and updates all the time, but then when you go out, you don't see people in masks. You don't see people, in certain areas doing their due diligence to make sure that they're protecting themselves and others, and it's really disheartening. Yeah. So we can all lead by example, and you can still support local businesses and order takeout, but please try to still do social distancing and mask wearing.
And if you have questions, please reach out. I think the best way to get to the bottom of those things is, if you can't find the answer, we'll dig around, and I love the research. We will make sure to get to whatever information we can, because we still need each other to get through this. And I think at this stage, we've all been touched in one way or another by the tragedy and loss of this pandemic. We have someone who works here actually on the floor below us, who we work with. It's in critical care right now. And so, you know, there's a sense of sadness that it was preventable, and a sense of urgency that the next person that could be, if we're getting to them today, that's one more person. So we have our vaccine ongoing Orange County vaccination site at Camping World Stadium. We have the mobile vaccine site that we're updating daily that we can take out to almost any community gathering. So please stay in touch with us if you think of a good place for that, and we can help schedule.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you can email district1@ocfl.net.
Thank you.
Have a good night.